Hello, welcome. Kit is up here today, which normally he is not. I'm going to switch the camera just for you to see. Here, let me switch this. He's purring very slightly. I don't know if you can hear him. Kit, he's playing with the mouse. There he is. So handsome. Wait, look. Psst, psst. Wow. Ooh. I'm putting the mouse like right on the screen in front of him. Oh, oh. Getting a good look at those green eyes. This is the most screen time he has had by far. Huh, buddy? Ah. Very rare for him to be up on the desk, but also I'm not complaining. Hello, Turd Bomb. Welcome. Yep, Kit the kitty. His full name is Kit Kat, and we call him Kit. Mostly call him Buddy, Bud, Budster. Um, Sometimes we also call him Stinky. That just depends. But anyway, shall we do the intro this way? I mean, we all know who is craving the spotlight here. What the audience wants to see. It's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri Devashrayee, and this is Kit. My buddy. He is, we think, the breed Turkish van. That has not been like confirmed by any sort of tests, but also this is just what we've looked up online. That we're like, oh, Turkish vans seem to look exactly like him. So there's that. Is that because he was eating a Kit Kat when you found him? That would be a great story. Our neighbor, who we think was also cooking meth, that's a different story. They were like, oh, look, we found a kitten. And they knew that we had just recently gotten a cat, Juniper, and a, a kitten that was pretty small. And they're like, do you want to like watch it for a sec? And then they're like, actually, do you want to take him? And he was so dirty. Don't snitch on your neighbor. Like, you know? At least not where we're living now. This was a while ago. But we think they were engaged in, not cooking soap. Well, not making soap, not invested in creating like homeopathic medicines, anything of that sort. We'll put it that way, even though I already said that we think they're cooking meth. um but they eventually were like, hey, can you just take this cat? They kept calling him a girl, which, as like a non-binary person, which I wasn't like out at the time, like coming to terms with my own gender identity, but I was also like, okay, I think this is a boy cat, but he also has a lot of feminine energy. So what do you think, bud? We do call him Bud, though, so that is pretty gendered, I guess. Um, where was I going with this? Oh, he was so dirty when they gave him to us. We thought he was like a little gray, like flat-faced cat because his fur was just like so ruffled and he was so dirty that we gave him a little bath and we were like, "Oh, he's white. He's not a little flat-faced cat." But his tail, because he's like a very, do you mind, buddy? I'm gonna show off your badge of honor. He's very, oh, sorry, I don't mean to expose you like that. Whoops. His like very fluffy tail. Oh, so sassy. It looked like a little bugle. If you've had those chips before, it was very, very cute. Huh. Like a little Dorito. Anyway, we can get back to the regular camera. This one is trippy because it constantly is like zooming in and whatnot that I'm like, this is a lot. Oh, I'm so excited he's up here. Huh, bud? He's been wanting more attention today, which is very sweet. Okay, now it's zooming on me, which I don't really want. So let's do this. There we go. Now we can still get him in there. All right. Hello, Aliana. Welcome. Yeah, my partner named Kit. He was like, the next cat we get, because I always wanted to have a cat growing up and also to name the cat Juniper because I thought it was like cute. Because like there, being in Utah, there are a lot of like evergreen and like juniper trees around. Um, but also it's like a play on words of like nip, like junip for like catnip, and then purr, like a cat. Which we don't call her any of those things. Nip, purr. We call her Junebug very occasionally, but mostly call her by her full name. Mostly, actually, more than that, we call her Bug. Buggy. Bugster. We call him the Budster. Budster. Bud. Buddy. Yeah. Not like the most exciting of stories, but we did find out um the animal shelter that like we got Juniper from and that we were thinking about dropping him off at because we were like, can we afford like another cat? like, like I don't know if we're able to take care of two, but we just got attached to him. He's a very sweet guy. And the animal shelter is a very bad place. We'll just put it that way. I don't want to say this in front of him. Hmm. Oh, he's just laying down. Buddy. He likes to rest his head on like the weirdest things. Like he's always been that way. He's always liked to have like a little pillow, which I feel like is kind of unusual for a cat. But like he'll like rest his head on the ledges and sometimes places that are like kind of sharp in nature. I'm just like, okay, interesting, but we love you all the same. I was told by my psychiatrist I apparently fall under the spectrum of psychopathy today. How's your day going? I relate to that a lot. I've never actually gone to a psychiatrist. I've gone to like therapists and also doctors, and I have like a number of things that they're like, wow, this is interesting. I'm like, I know. Especially, I don't know if that you have done this or like what it is like in Canada, but in public health, there's something called like adverse childhood experiences or like ACEs, and they now are starting to do more like testing for that. And I remember upon first learning about those that I was like filling some things out and I was like, uh-oh, this explains a lot. I didn't think of this as being trauma, but you know, the more you learn, I guess. The more you learn about your trauma, the more hopefully you can address it. Question mark. But I hope that you're doing okay and that you can also like get the resources that you need. Like that's what matters. I'm doing all right. It's an interesting time. Misgendered the gators. They now he's beautiful. He's very beautiful, which is why I'm like, I know they don't really understand a concept of gender. It's like a man-made social structure, but yeah, animals don't care. So like why should we? We're also animals. Hello, Linton. Welcome. How were your studies? I know that you were finishing up with your exams, also wanting to take a break with things. Did you see my second message? Yes. Have you talked about Allison St. Clair already? Allison St. Clair. Is this the like one of Elon Musk's baby mamas? Or is that Ashley? Or is this something else? Yes. Sorry about not seeing that earlier, getting to it in a delayed manner, Aliana. Especially with like having Kit right in front of like where I normally read my chats. very I was very distracted and also obstructed visually. But I hope you can be okay. Take time to take care of yourself. And yeah, things are interesting, especially like during Pride. I'll probably get on into this in a little bit of, just like setting up boundaries, honoring our worth. It can be very difficult to do, but that is also a form of pride. It's like actually having more self-respect and honoring who we are, seeing the beauty in ourselves. I want a cat named Chairman Meow so badly. You should. There's someone who sometimes is a viewer in chatter, I think Photo Piadini, who is Italian, who has 3 cats, and one of them is named Meow for like Mao. And I love that. Yeah, very cool. Studies are over now, on to more personal studies. Ooh, yay! I love that. I know you were saying like possibly thinking about going into sociology, but also wanting to do more reading on your own. And I hope that you've been able to engage in some of that. Ashley, yes, speaking out against MAGA. I have seen that she has been speaking out against MAGA for a bit, which I think is great because she's exposing a lot of their tactics and techniques about like influencers being paid and how they coordinate all of their messaging, and that it's like people who are in the Trump administration who are part of these group chats and stuff. But yeah, is there anything new that's going on with her? Good for her for, getting out of that bullshit. But I mean, why anyone would be attracted to Elon Musk in the first place is really beyond me. I'm not going to shame her for that. Just, I, I don't know. He's a freaky person, and not in like a cool freaky way, fun freaky way. Turns out a pride event falls when I'm in Amsterdam. That'll be fun. Amsterdam is a party city. And especially with like that being a fact, like it tracks a lot of queer activity, a lot of substances of various kinds being very available there. I was there at one point when, like, it wasn't during the festival. I think it was right after. And I mean, like, Amsterdam, they have their own issues in many ways still. But, and they can still, like, tokenize people. And also, like, there's the, like, corporate type of aspect of pride of people just wanting our money, but not, like, our humanity and dignity. So there's that, but also like it's cool to actually have more places where there can be more celebration, especially like more outward celebration where things are a lot more normalized in many ways. So you might see some things if you are not exposed to like many queer spaces already. You might see some things that like might be at first shocking to the cishet perspective. I was going to say gaze, but that also sounds like gaze. Cishet, Gaze. But that might be good. That might be good for people. But that sounds like that will be fun. Do you have any plans for Amsterdam as well? The Netherlands is another neolib shithole. Yeah, but socially Amsterdam is so progressive from my limited viewpoint. Yeah, it's a lot more progressive than other places. I know that, like, especially as there have been people who, in particular, are trans, have immigrated there, like with a refugee status. There has been a lot of like transphobia that people have experienced and stuff, but yeah, also just to highlight all of the like hierarchies of marginalization within queerness, then as people experience those intersections of marginalization, that they are more likely to obviously, because that's what marginalization means, is like just be experiencing more ills in society. But yeah, it's like compared to even like where I'm at, or especially where I'm at in Utah, it is way more accepting. Like I remember being there and like seeing all of these like pride flags, and even if it is in like a performative manner where they just want our money, it like made me emotional. Where I was like, wow, I don't feel like I am being viewed, at least openly, as like a monster. But you know, smoke, shrooms, windmill, nice. I have heard so many Palestine flags hanging from apartments. Yes, when I was there were just impromptu, at least from what it looked like, because like things are so condensed, which I'm sure there is like more organization to start some things, but like because of like the condensed like infrastructure of the city, that there were a lot of marches that were happening for Palestine, which was really cool. It's like everyday people know what's happening, you know, or a lot of us do, at least. You know, everyday people in the globe are like, we recognize when human beings are just being genocided, not just, but are being genocided, and how like our collective dignity is reflected in this, of how the ruling classes see us. So, but it was cool to see how there were people who didn't look like they were originally like part of the march, like people just starting to like join in. And that is really exciting, where it's like a lot of the time, like people want to do more stuff, but they can have a hard time knowing even where to start. But it's also a phenomenon that is very rare in the US in particular, not just because of propaganda and being in the heart of empire, although like those are very real factors. It also has to do with like everything being very spread apart, like the infrastructure itself of like not really having dense populations outside of these very large cities. And even then, that like sometimes like how wide the roads are and stuff, like how close the buildings are or not, that affects like actual organizational movement of people having more of an opportunity to just like look out their window and see what's going on and feel like they have like the time and space to actually join in an impromptu manner. Saw a demo damn near every day there too. Yeah, it's really cool. It's like there is a lot of solidarity there, especially when it's very much a world city with like how diverse it is. I love that there's so many different kinds of food. There's some really great food there. And there are some good museums. Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting because, like, being there, I was like, are the buildings, like, tilted? They look like I kind of feel like I'm in a fun house, but it's just because of, like, the earth not being very solid, I guess. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a scientist, despite me having this on my desk. Not a scientist, but I've had some bomb Chinese and Korean food there. Yeah, I've had some really good Indian food. Um, had some really good Italian food there. I think I've had some Japanese food there. That was good. It's just that having really good food is like, oh, this is a reason to exist. It like makes existing like slightly less intolerable. The buildings are tilted slightly forward on purpose because the stays are too narrow for furniture, so they all have a hook on the top of the house they can winch furniture up on. Oh, interesting. I also heard somewhere it was like kind of like swampy land. I mean, clearly there are all of these like canals and stuff. So all the buildings slightly lean into the street so the things don't collide. Interesting. I think I probably like heard this on a tour or something and was like jet lagged and was like, huh? And also probably high. Actually, I was. So there is that. Uh, I did not stream yesterday. Life is just lifing. Things can be complicated at times. I'll be honest, sometimes I like wonder if I'm able to keep streaming just with life happening, everything. So normally I'm not one to be like even going into like the very personal details of stuff, but also like requesting this. See, I don't even know how to go about this. Like, if you feel like, I know people have very limited means at the time, but if you feel like you have gained something of value from this stream, any sort of support, whether that's like a follow or a subscription or being involved in the Patreon there, like subscribing on YouTube, like any sort of like support that way, like does help me monetarily, which just to like not get too much into details would greatly help me at this time, showing some allyship that way. But yeah, especially like in the month of Pride, like we need to be talking about how joy is an act of resistance, like these Pride celebrations, but also talking about why it's necessary. Of like with my employment situation of like having to work odd jobs that I like don't get into details of intentionally, but like being pushed out of the job I was in before, which was working for the government. Surprise, surprise, that they would not want the likes of me or like other queer people as well. That like not being able to find a job with applications and having they them pronouns. This is not to be like poor me. This is to just be talking about experience in the way of like, I clearly am not the only one experiencing this. I also am light skinned, and like being non binary can have like proximity to cisness as well, even though I consider myself trans. Um, but when I like am presenting more femme, I can have proximity to cisness there as well. And being in a relationship that is more like hetero presenting, like these are forms of privilege. And so like that means I don't experience as much marginalization as what some other people do. But also like with any sort of form of like application process that I've experienced, especially with all of these like AI bots and that shit, like I don't think really any of my applications get seen by human beings, that they filter out because they try to pretend like they're being inclusive of like, what pronouns do you have, and they use it as a way to like intentionally not choose people who have pronouns that fall outside of like this binary. So I think like my pronouns make it so that I don't hear back from people, even places that like claim to be like queer friendly. There also is this concept, like as I've mentioned before, of like gay men especially like being chosen as kind of like these tokens, but they're like one of the like easiest like more digestible forms of queerness for this like cis het patriarchal society that we're living in. And so it's like that's not their fault, but also it's just like an example of like these oppressive systems. And so also having like a last name that's Sanskrit, especially in Utah where most people are like, what is that? Is that French? And it's like, no, you know neither French nor Sanskrit. You just told me very clearly. And then also having like a female first name of like experiencing all of that bullshit is like, it can be very disheartening at times, and feeling like you have to spin your wheels in order to have any sort of momentum in this capitalist hellscape. Hello, Anarcho Taco. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you. How are you doing? But yeah, so like the whole job search thing, that is very soul sucking. And it also is like, okay, what do you balance with job search? And then also like doing that in a more like formal way through applications, also just going in and like seeing people, and like me trying to find like really any type of job. Like this is why I work like very odd jobs a lot of the time, because like I usually go in presenting more androgynous so that I can actually see what people's prejudices are, because if I go in presenting very femme, they aren't nearly as like hateful. And I can tell immediately that like, and it's gotten worse over time, especially in this fascist moment of people just like either like kicking me out immediately, or like not like listening like a little bit to what I have to say, or like not taking my resume, or like saying that they're going to call me back or whatever. Like, and for hourly jobs, and then also like in Indeed, I think the same thing happens there with like filtering out pronouns and bullshit. That like the whole process can be very discouraging. And like this isn't again to say like poor me, this is just to talk about how like I'm not the only one experiencing this, and this is why pride is necessary, to be talking about these very real forms of oppression that make it so that just make it so like it has the intended effect of just making it so we don't have as many opportunities, of like being pushed out of workplaces, not being paid enough, where it's like the preferable thing for society is that like we just don't exist. And if we don't exist, then it's like then you are forced to conform so that like you can have more opportunities, but then that's also like going against your own humanity and dignity. And then if you can't conform, then you just like stay invisible and you aren't allowed to like be in public at all. And so like there can just be some very dehumanizing experiences that like I try to let it kind of roll off my back, but it can be very difficult at times. So, if you feel like you've gained anything that is helpful, of value from this stream, I would appreciate support where you are able to provide it, whether that is monetary, like through subscriptions, gifted ones, or more of just like the support of like following. Like you don't have to, it doesn't always have to be monetary, although that like certainly would help me at the time. But it also is just to say like many of us are experiencing this. So like when you are coming in contact with queer people, especially during this time of Pride, that like many people are experiencing these same things and that they may not be talking about all of the details of what it means to be marginalized and how like as people are experiencing more intersections of marginalization that like they are feeling even more invisibilized and also targeted a lot of the time, like invisible and targeted, which is just like a weird paradox, but here we are. And like I even have privilege of being light skinned where people like assume that I'm white, but then also like finding out my last name or like pronouns and all of that shit that has an impact as well. So it can just be very draining. And so I'm just taking this time to say that like we need to protect our peace, do what we need to still like have boundaries and like show love to ourselves in the ways that we can. I am at work doing multitasking, slacktivism. Slacktivism. I love that term. It's Friday for you. I love that. Job search is data harvesting. Yeah, it's data mining. Exactly. And it's a form of surveillance, which is why I also have a hard time, like you saying, like send your government ID. Like there's this aspect on YouTube where you can restrict certain videos to people who are not 18 and above. And especially when I'm talking about more like sexual topics, like we've talked about this before of like, when there are people who don't get good education on like just sexual education in general, like where are they going to find it if everything is like banned from them, like 18 and up? But in the meantime, there's all of this harm being caused. And also like in order to have people actually access the like 18 and up videos, people have to provide a form of ID. And I am extremely against that. Like that is a form of surveillance. So I try to say like on the title, like 18 and up. But yeah, it all just is, it's all just bullshit. Slacktivism is reclaiming my time from my corporate overlords. Oh, I love that. Yes. Of like, you can't dictate what I'm doing, like actually having some autonomy in your day. I love that. We need more of that. But yeah, that's kind of where things are at. Feels like everywhere is regressing. There's new stories and policies coming out every day. Yeah. And like sadly, especially like for queer people, like queer people of color and like disabled queer people and trans people especially, and all these intersections that like what we're talking about, people who are more femme presenting or femme assumed as well, that like there is a lot more violence that is on the rise, and that's like what all of these policies are intended. So yeah, I think it's like it's not an accident, and like many of us have been saying like this is what happens, you know, but it just is like it's different to, I think, for some people to be just hearing about these stories versus like from like a news source versus like hearing about it from someone who's like personally experiencing it, especially with queer people like not wanting to necessarily like trauma dump in a lot of ways, which like maybe that's what I'm doing right now. I'm sorry. But also like just talking about how like this is like I'm not alone in this. This is what many people are experiencing. Although the solidarity has been so strong in the UK, the Reform Council cut all funding to Pride. Yeah, I heard that. So they crowdfunded for a bigger Pride than ever. Oh, love. Queer applause. But yeah, that's just like part of the reality in just talking about like why Pride is necessary. It's not just about them taking our money. It's not just about like wearing rainbows. It's about actually highlighting like these forms that make it so people are pushed to the outskirts in a very violent manner, and that it is difficult to just exist as a human being. And of course, like, it's not just queer people, which is why we need to be looking at liberation as a collective thing. So I think I'm trying to focus on like more of the resistance aspect of Pride, because I can often, like, maybe this is not being as generous as I should be. I can often be like irritated going to some Pride events, especially when I see straights or like the cis hets that seem to be there just to like want to have something to do or be around taste or like some culture, but then also not take on any form of risk. And I don't know what people are doing in their personal lives, but like I think many people are resistant to actually like speaking up and not also like finger wagging at certain types of resistance, especially when it comes to cops, and then being like, oh, but why wouldn't you want a Pride without police? That's like, okay. You clearly don't understand what's going on. And like often this is like allyship that leads to people like co-opting queer spaces, and then queer people being harassed in spaces that should be safe spaces to begin with. In Durham, trade unions and personal donations came together to put on a huge one. I love that. The traditionalist crowd take the celebration, they forget the origin was a riot. Yes, exactly. That it was throwing bricks at pigs, and that they are the ones who are then trying to dictate what is respectable resistance. And it's like, you aren't experiencing these conditions. So like, shut the fuck up. Pink washing runs so deep. People try to pink wash themselves. Yeah, exactly. That is so real. But like, to all of my queer siblings out there, I know this may come across as like parasocial or like woo-woo, but I also don't care. Like, as I am talking about like hijra identity as well, and like embracing that sense of like ancestral memory and magic that is decolonizing, that I just want all of my queer siblings to know that I love you very much, and that I'm sending solidarity and strength and love to you, and that you can choose the people who are in your lives, and you should, and put up boundaries with people if you feel like they are not honoring your personhood. That is pride, taking pride in who you are and honoring who you are, and not just abiding by a lot of the gaslighting that happens at large in society of like families have to look a certain way or you have to present a certain way. That like, it is so fucking cool and brave to be yourself and beautiful, that like, who wants to be like other people anyway? Like, even though that's what they want, they're fucking boring. Not everyone is. There are plenty of like actual allies showing solidarity here that are in the chat, so thank you. But yeah, and thank you to the people who actually show this solidarity. It is greatly needed, and also like showing support for the various types of resistance that queer people are engaging in ways that actually move the needle. That's not all of this shaming. So thank you for that. Also, if you have any like queer people in your life that you know personally, just checking up on them as things are getting harder. That's not to be like saying like coming from like a condescending perspective of like, are you okay? But just genuinely asking how people are doing and speaking up in spaces where like you can be a messenger where queer people would not be listened to. This is where I say like messengers matter when it comes to like delivering certain kinds of ideas that like if you are not immediately like physically threatened being in a particular space, or you might more likely might be listened to, like using that privilege to like call people out when they are saying bullshit about marginalized people of like any kind. Like we should all be doing this with all like any form of privilege that we have, like actually using it to do some fucking good. But and that's like what collective solidarity and liberation means. But yeah, just actually showing support in ways that like is not just wearing rainbows, like actually doing it in everyday life, like calling people out on their shit, taking on some risk at times and saying like in standing up for people, especially if there are like some mutual aid that you know of in your various local areas, that this is far more effective in helping people than like donating to nonprofits that often are not using these funds very wisely, or they're like siphoning the funds, or they just are using it to enrich their executives. I worked for a nonprofit at one point, so I'm speaking from some experience here. But anyway, that's like a little more of a serious take on things. But thank you for being here, for all of your support. I do appreciate it. There are some days where I, like with everything going on, I like don't know if I'm able to like maintain streaming. And like whenever I do, when I am able to stream and I'm able to like converse with you all and exchange ideas and talk about the things that actually matter and like how we have shared goals and principles, like I think there is some magic in that, like in the sense of like creating it from ideas and like speech, but like having it be realized in the world, like actually creating something with our words and our thoughts that I think is really powerful. I work with farmers. There is an art to dropping that's a fucked up view. It takes practice. Yeah, exactly. And like I like having grown up in Utah, currently living in Utah, it's it's a very common thing to be coming across, like most of the time, people who are not necessarily going to agree with like my viewpoints or more progressive viewpoints in general. So yeah, it takes a lot of tact. Not meaning that there has to be like unnecessary aggression in like correcting people, but also like I think a lot of it is kind of like living by example of like, oh yeah, I'm fine with like being in these kinds of spaces and these people, and just like having it not be a big deal. Because most of the time, people are not really out trying to build their own principles and moral compasses. It's usually just peer pressure in their environments, and also how there is so much religious brainwashing that goes into it. And so people are just kind of like reacting in ways how they've been conditioned to. So that's also like a huge factor in actually dismantling all of the propaganda. and hopefully creating more like solidarity across all of these different perceptions of difference. We had some bullshit over here in the UK, predictable bullshit, but bullshit nonetheless. The government's appeal on the Palestine action was ruled on. I did see that. And the ban was deemed legal again. Yeah, I mean, the UK, there really is a lot that is just mimicking what's happening in the US, which is really bleak for you all, especially with like what the Reform Party is doing. I saw like a post the other day of like these deeply racist, xenophobic, just like disgusting things that some people in the Reform Party have said specifically about Nigerian immigrants, that it's like and there are no consequences. Like there was like some sort of, they were going to say they were going to be investigated and then ended up not being investigated. That's just like, oh, this is a bleak time, which is why we need collective solidarity. Like it is a radical thing to actually be viewing other people as human beings. And like that really shouldn't be a radical thing. Like actually feeling like we have shared human dignity that we should all be fighting for. They want to quote, melt down Nigerian immigrants to fill the potholes. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one that I saw. That I was like, and then people trying to claim like it's a joke or whatever. That's like, that's always what people do when they feel like, when they've done something and it's been received in a way that people don't like, or they're getting enough pushback where they're saying like it's like it's just a joke. People can't take a joke. That's like, that's not what a joke means. And if it is, then you have a shit sense of humor. It just is so deplorable. Reform also said she's sick of seeing black and brown people in adverts and on TV. Yeah, it's like as if there's like a huge representation of black and brown people on TV to begin with. It just is more out and proud fascism that needs to be called out. It really is evil. Charles made a domestic violence joke today. This is like what, like how I keep circling back to domestic violence rises under fascism because fascism is inherently violent, and how like it gets to be more normalized as well, and why we were talking about a little bit ago this aspect of like non-consensual choking happening, but like in particular in these like cis het like male female relationships that are like extremely disturbing and worrisome. Well, thank you for sharing this. Women's safety.
Oh, it's real. It's real. It's real. It's real. I've checked. It's real. I've been to her page. She really posted this, and it'll probably still be up if you go and look.
Oh, wait, I do have captions. For the sake of women's safety, we need England to keep women winning.
These people don't have any shame at all. So of course we'll keep it up.
England won the football last night, and thank goodness they did, because on the occasions that England lose their football matches, the incidences of domestic violence go through the roof. So, boys, keep winning.
So no, not a campaign saying that men shouldn't hit their wives or girlfriends. Just a campaign to say, hey, just cheer louder. And it's important to remember the context.
Insanity.
This is Sarah Pochin, an MP of the Reform Party, a party who one of their elected MPs was convicted for repeatedly kicking his girlfriend to the point that several bouncers had to pull him off of her. A party whose deputy leader, Richard Tice, literally said he didn't believe the victim because he was, quote, on his side, the side of James Murdoch, the man who beat his girlfriend, a
Mm,
party whose leader, Nigel Farage,
typical.
said that the conviction for beating
Nigel
his girlfriend
Garbage.
was irrelevant to whether or not he should continue to be a member of parliament. You know, somebody who has the power to write our laws on things like beating your girlfriend. But tomorrow, this party will claim that they take the safety of women and girls seriously. Oh my god.
At first I was like, that doesn't sound bad. And then her being like, oh, I didn't understand. I was like, what does this have to do with that? And that's just right. What does that have to do with domestic violence? Like, what the fuck? Ugh. Excuse me. And 4 in 10 of the rioters arrested last year had prior convictions for DV. Yeah, exactly. It also is like one of these things that we've seen with the insurrectionists who were trying to overthrow the 2020 election in the US, that most of them have criminal charges of domestic violence and abuse and like abusing minors specifically. That's like, who are we trying to protect here? It seems like when we're using the word crime and criminal, there's a very loose definition of it that seems to just be applied to or it's never applied to anyone who is being viewed as having the same stance as the current fascist regime. Interesting. Which is why we need to call out how, like, words have meaning. I mean, clearly, words have power. And that, like, we need to be calling things what they are. And rather than letting them dictate the terms of, like, what these words even mean, like what violence even means, that like when we're talking about violence, it never is thought of as state violence by I mean the state itself, obviously, and how like these definitions of words and their concepts are institutionalized through policy and enforcing of the law through the pigs, and how like when we are resisting these systems that are inherently violent and anti-human, like there are no tactics that should be viewed as off limits. That's my way of saying that. Yeah, just because it's like, how else are we going to find justice through a system that inherently is unjust? How are we going to find liberation in a system, in these systems that are inherently oppressive and meant to chain us? That like we have to rely on ourselves and also like think beyond what they are telling us is possible in the world, which is like kind of like what you were saying, anarcho taco, of like in what you shared in the Discord of like what we think of as the world. Like there's so much collective gaslighting that is done to us that if we are able to actually like think of the world in a certain way and like act in ways that's more humanizing, that creates like a little piece of the world where that actually exists. And that is like, once again, as I'm like talking about magic or like whatever, like realizing things like into fruition, like actually having that be part of our everyday lives. Like there is so much power in that. And also the fact that like how these concepts of like having an expansive imagination and like expansive ideas of what it even means to be a human being, that it is a way to decolonize, and that there is a lot of fear of these systems, that we actually realize that what they're telling us of who matters and who doesn't is complete bullshit, and that it is radical to actually be viewing other people as human beings, and ourselves, especially ourselves, as there are so many instances of dehumanization that we all experience in one form of or another, and that like actually viewing ourselves as like being worth like having worth and like setting up boundaries around like what we view as acceptable to our person or not, like that is a good, not only to ourselves but also like creating that in a way, like in a part of the world that like it's not found in so many other aspects. I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm just kind of rambling at this point. But anyway, sending you all solidarity, strength, love, not to be parasocial about it, but just to show that, like, there are people with some shared views and principles that are actually wanting to make a difference in the world in some way, that, like, we all have worth. And that shouldn't be a radical thing to say or to be acting in a way, or acting in a way that makes that real, but it is. So, anyway, that was my long spiel. But in a way to humanize ourselves more, actually provide a little more levity in having to endure this hellhole we call capitalism, that and late stage fascism. I mean, same thing, but especially now that we're in like this very techno feudalist system where like we're past the point of Marx saying that the bourgeois overthrew feudalism. We're back to like the aristocrats and the bourgeois, that like this is all the same now, that there's way more wealth accumulation and accumulation of power as well than like we have ever had in the history of humankind. So we need to be talking about that. But while those like losers, these fascist losers who think that they only find meaning through dehumanizing other people, we are going to humanize ourselves and actually engage in some satire, some hee-hee-hees, maybe even some ha-ha-has, in viewing something that will hopefully bring a little bit of levity. Also, some social commentary that we enjoy. By the way, I was going to tell you this, Linton. I watched Common Side Effects that you recommended. It is so good. It is excellent and really like terrifying how accurate it is in many ways. There are some aspects that I think of like anyone who is viewed as being like in touch with nature, especially white people, they're kind of viewed as like, whoa, but it's like, okay, this is like indigenous practice and stuff. So like, I think I would have liked to see that a little more of like locals who discovered the mushroom first, because that's probably what would have been happening, like if that was more true to life, of like indigenous people discovering the power there and like using it for like ceremonies. So I think I would have liked more of that like additional decolonizing lens, but that's me being very nitpicky. Also just trying to have like a decolonizing lens in whatever I'm engaging with. But I really did enjoy especially that aspect of just like all of the various forces that can't let us have a good thing, you know? I love Common Side Effects. I 3D printed a Socrates model. Cute. Socrates is so cute. Yeah, it's a great show. I really enjoyed it. Once again, another excellent recommendation. I have to say, you really are hitting it every time. So I really trust your taste. I can't always say this, so I love that. But, you know, I'm also biased. I do think that the people who tend to tune in to this stream tend to have better taste anyway. Not because of me, but hopefully like curating a community of taste of what that actually means, not just like classism, that it's built in like a foundation of art being accessible and an expansive idea of what it means to be a human being. So, all right. Shall we give this a watch? This is episode 5 of A Very Fatal Murder, season 2, as if there is any other type of murder. And it's from The Onion. The previous episode, we did find out that the podcaster was, like, he did become friends with the killer, who is this billionaire. And it's like, of course, that's what's happening. He's like, yeah, we're best friends, when, like, the guy just doesn't want bad press. And so, this will be interesting to see what this one brings. Also, the really old CEO guy looks like Mares from Germany, fitting too with Mares' history with BlackRock. Yes, that's a really good observation. I hadn't made that connection, but you're right. And also, I love the fact how the CEO in uh yeah, the CEO of the company, I'm trying to remember what it's called, how he is just like constantly on his phone the whole time and like just playing games. He's not doing anything of substance, but has things done for him, and he's like being paid the most for doing the least. I'm like, yeah, that's very true to life. And then also like the owner, like the person who's on the board, how he like took all of those mushrooms, and I'm like, I love the fact that he's being like cursed for this selfishness and overindulgence, because we need that. We need more of that. All right. So, let's watch this episode. I am going to speed it up a bit, maybe be at 1.5, just so that we can get to some of these other things that I have planned for today. That's like most of my talking that I think I'm going to be doing today, just getting a lot of that out there, but more of like a low energy stream. I might rent Superman Red Sun soon. I've heard it's decent. I've also heard that is good. If you do, you'll have to let me know what you think. Anarcho Taco, I don't know if you're still here, but like how we were talking about a little bit ago, fan fiction. I came across like that just like reminded me of like how much I love fan fiction and have loved it. That there are some really great writers out there. That there was one about like Superman and Catwoman that I found, that I was like, I'm not normally someone who is like invested as much in uh like the various like superhero universes, but I was like, that's a much more interesting pairing to me than I feel of like Superman and Lois Lane. People are gonna hate me for this, I don't care. Or Bruce Wayne and like Selena Kyle. I feel like there's like much more room for like play there and like interest in like the difference of their personalities. Anyway. Oh, nice. Yeah, and there's like no pressure there, but I was just saying that like I found some fan fiction about Superman and Catwoman, and I'm like, I like that pairing. That's spicy. I feel like there's like this play of like someone who's like a Boy Scout mentality, who like really believes in like goodness and truth, and then like coming across someone who's like engaged in more like anarchism and like pet play. That I'm like, this is like a very interesting pairing that I think is better than like the billionaire playboy shit of Batman. I do think Batman is kind of billionaire propaganda. I know that will be an unpopular opinion, but I also think it's fairly accurate. So just calling that out there. I miss old Tumblr writers. I know. Some really great writers too. That they just like weren't compensated for the incredible art that they were creating. I think Batman would want to test his endurance against Wonder Woman, Amazonian goddess. That would be interesting. I also always thought like Superman and Wonder Woman made much more sense together with like their powers and stuff than like Superman and Lois Lane, which isn't to like diminish like smart women. I think like Wonder Woman is smart, not like the Gal Gadot version, okay, just calling that out. But yeah, that makes more sense. Seems like they're just like on each other's level more. I don't know. But if there are any sort of like interesting like pairings of like fan fiction of like shipping people, like do let me know. Like who secretly do you like ship in some of like your favorite media or entertainment that you're like, I wish this would happen. I feel like that kind of exercise is often more interesting than sometimes like the shows themselves or like the content itself. Kal-El! No! Yeah, what a horrible actor. Wayne Core reads Gotham inequality, then assigns itself as the savior. Yeah, exactly. And that, like, Batman would rather, like, beat up most of the time, like, mentally ill anarchists, or just, like, anarchists themselves, rather than, like, putting himself in prison or like the people like Commissioner Gordon or like the dirty cops or the politicians that he serves. It's just because Lois doesn't have powers. Yeah, I know. I think that's why people like it, is that there's like an interesting power dynamic there, like quite literally. Pretty ableist, TBH. Ableist of me or ableist of them? Lois doesn't have any powers. Yeah, which hers are like, her powers are viewed as like sass and wit and smarts, which I love. I love that concept of being like, you can be a human and you don't have to have like superhuman powers, whatever that means, in order to like be viewed as an interesting person. Interesting fanfic ships, Crowley and Azrael in Good Omens. I don't know what Good Omens is. I'm gonna look this up. Okay. If you want to keep I'm gonna be looking this up while I start playing this. If you want to keep sharing some of your interesting ships, please do.
Crime occurs in a moment, or in a series of moments, or in years and years of moments, depending on the crime. I couldn't find any statistics on exactly how long a crime takes. I've asked Sydney to do some digging and she's working on it. But no matter how long a crime takes, for a person declared guilty, their life changes in an instant. That places a lot of pressure on the evidence to show what really happened. But all evidence is really is a series of details. Details. They say the devil's in those.
Oh.
Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, he has many names. The personification of evil. Murder is evil. And if the devil's in the details, and evidence is detail.
Here we go. Okay. So like these angels. I did know, okay, it does look familiar to me, but I have not seen it. Aziraphale and Crowley. Ooh, I love especially like the queer pairings. Yeah, David Tennant. He is an incredible actor. He was in a version of Hamlet that was very good, where he played Hamlet, of course. Okay. I'm gonna have to check that show out. Very interesting.
Evidence of a murder is sometimes just as evil as the murder itself.
Thinking like,
that was good.
Avatar: The Last Airbender. I watched that growing up. I always wanted Zuko and Katara to end up together.
Objection! You are receiving a call from the ocean floor.
3 fish tacos, please. You know what? Make it 4.
Lois, the human reporter, would pair better with
LAPD found
Batman.
at the crime scene that matches
Yes.
DNA. This is damning evidence against Mr. Reed, Your Honor.
Plus, Batman owns the newspaper she works for.
In the case of the state of California against Milo Reed. If a trial is like dinner, a preliminary hearing is a little bit like an
didn't know that.
Too bad a trial is nothing like dinner.
That's interesting. So what if like Batman and Superman just like swap their romantic interests?
Criminal Justice Center. Inside, you can track a person's case through the entire system, from their arrest to their preliminary hearing, arraignment to their trial.
I think that would make for some interesting content.
Millions of people go through this system every day. Right now, we are at the beginning.
Order! Order in the court!
The
Oh, it's
evidentiary
also
hearing
a
I sat in on
book?
was a good opportunity for Milo and his team, and myself,
I'll
to learn all about
probably,
the prosecution's key evidence.
because I'm
beginning
me,
with the
I
saliva.
probably will
How would
want
you
to
explain
read the
the saliva,
book
Milo?
first.
This one's tough.
I don't know. Maybe somebody planted it
Thank
there.
you
I
for
don't
the
know.
Maybe
recommendation.
someone planted it there. Was that possible? And if so, wouldn't that poke a huge hole in the prosecution's case? Sydney, are there any recent cases where cops, or anyone really, planted evidence to frame someone?
Yeah, well, evidence tampering happens all the time, but cops framing someone for murder by planting their DNA, that's more rare, but it does happen. The problem is it's very hard to prove. But the actual reason I wanted to talk to you is about my position. I feel like with all the work that I've been doing for the podcast, associate producer might be a more appropriate title.
But it wasn't enough that my personal assistant was pretty sure it's possible to plant evidence. See, there's an old saying, if you want to do something right, I have to do it myself. So I set out with a simple question. How easy is it to plant someone's DNA at a crime scene?
Double homicide, burglary, homicide, murder-suicide.
Set the filters for homicides only. As a former police chief, I called in some favors and got an opportunity to look through some active
His
LAPD
assistant
files.
trying
And I
to
brought Sydney along because she's
advocate for
30
more
Can you remind me what we're
pay.
looking for again?
Open murder case, no suspects. We finally found a juicy homicide. A man was found shot and killed in his home.
An
Totally dead.
upgrade
Detectives have been working
in
the case for a week with no leads,
her
no
job
witnesses, no
title
suspects. At least,
that
not
he
yet.
immediately just
Using my
goes
OPR connections,
over,
I acquired a
like,
vial of blood
not
from a local medical
caring.
facility. But I was on my own for this part. After I told
Sounds
Sydney my plan,
real.
she totally bailed on me. So much for wanting a promotion, I guess. Okay, I've got the blood, I've got the address. Time to go expose some holes in the system. Fuck, was that my exit? Planting the blood on the crime scene was alarmingly easy. Some police were stationed out front of the victim's house, so all I had to do was sneak around back and go in through a window. I put a small bit of blood on the doorknob and a little bit more on the side of a cabinet and snuck back out. All right, so I just planted blood at the crime scene, and to be honest, it's shocking how easy that is. The system's
Just
broken.
planting
Using
evidence
a voice changer I found
because
online, I
he's
called the
friends
detective
with
on the
the killer is so insane.
I'll give you a clue. There's blood on the doorknob in the cabinet.
Days later, an arrest was made and a new trial was underway.
Marcus Dugan, you are charged with the murder of Peter
I
Malaho.
didn't do this. I don't even know this man.
Marcus Dugan
Back
was an
when I
innocent
was
man, framed,
into
arrested, and
Harry
charged with
Potter
murder.
more,
But why?
there was part of
Because he
me
done
that
the
kind
blood
of
test
like
at the wrong place at
wanted
the wrong time. And the fact that Marcus' blood didn't
Hermione
help, the racial bias of our legal
to
system,
be
paired
with
his blood that I planted at the crime scene,
Draco.
led the court to see this good man as a criminal. It was appalling. So if you look at the tragic case of Marcus Dugan, you can see that it is possible to plant
It's
DNA
written by
evidence at a
Terry
crime scene,
Pratchett,
which
who's
means it's also
awesome.
possible
And
that's what
Neil
happened with
Gaiman
Milo's
is
saliva. But the
problematic.
saliva wasn't the only
Okay,
piece of evidence.
The
interesting.
state will also be calling Michael
Good to
Fernieri
know.
to the stand. He has agreed to testify under
Maybe
oath that
there's
he
just
saw
like
the-
this is revealing me liking these kind of like character arcs or like tropes in a lot of stories of like the whole like enemies to like lovers pipeline that can be problematic at times, like especially in like real life. But if they're like just calling out like if there's any sort of like untoward behavior or like even like power imbalances or like violence, but I like the spiciness there of like these strong feelings mutating to like different strong feelings. Koalas have human fingerprints and confuse our investigations. Is that real? Are you serious?
Defendant fleeing the crime scene that morning.
Okay, eyewitness testimony is hard to argue with. So
With
how did
the
Milo's defense feel about it?
Milo, could there be any other
chlamydia
reason you may have been at the crime scene
fingerprints?
that morning?
No, he's lying. He's a liar, and I've
That
never met him,
also
but I
is
hate
very
him.
Milo
human.
claimed to have not even been at the crime scene. But wouldn't that mean Michael Fernieri was lying? Could this be possible? To find out exactly how easy it is to commit perjury in a court of law, I returned to the case of Marcus Dugan.
Your Honor, my client has an airtight alibi. He was nowhere near the victim's home on the day of the murder.
That's Marcus's lawyer. The voice you'll hear next is the prosecuting attorney.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dugan's alibi is false, and we know this because there was an eyewitness who saw the murder with his own eyes.
Oh my god. Koalas are the only non-primates with fingers. Koalas have fingerprints almost identical to ours. What? This is crazy. Oh my god. They're not really enemy dynamics, they're just awkward allies. Okay, interesting. Oh, for specifically the Good Omens one? Like Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is like I remember reading that for the first time like in 7th grade and being like, oh, well, people were like reading Twilight. This is the difference. And like some people, like 9th graders who had to read it for school, they're like, why are you reading that? I'm like, I like it. I didn't understand everything clearly, but also being like, wow, this is a whirlwind. Romeo just went from being extremely, like, lovesick to instantly forgetting Rosalind and being in love with Juliet. That I'm like, how can you trust this bitch? But, I mean, it's all just fantasy.
The prosecution calls David Pascal to the stand.
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That was my first lie.
Mr. Pascal, you're saying you saw the defendant, Marcus Dugan, shoot and kill Mr. Malinois?
That's right. I was walking down the street and I heard some sounds like gunshots and screams, and being a podcaster, I thought, hey, those could come in handy
Also,
someday. So I
one
went
of
inside
the
to
like
see what was going
enemies.
on.
And what did you see inside the house?
I saw him
Tropes
shooting
of
the
like
guy, killing him,
shipping that I
Then
wanted to
guess,
see.
Like, he had a cut on his hand, and he
Back when
touched
I
the
was like
doorknob and the
more
cabinet,
into
and then
Harry
he left.
Potter.
That's me again, lying on the witness stand. It's
Was
shockingly easy
Harry
to do.
and
The fact
Draco.
that our justice system allowed me to do this is a disgraceful oversight.
Mr. Pascal, is the killer in this room today?
You bet.
Let the record show that the witness is pointing at the defendant and has been this entire time for some reason.
Lie after lie after lie, and they ate it up. I guess the trial's a little bit more like dinner than I thought. But one eyewitness isn't enough.
There he is.
Or
Your
like
Honor.
Hermione
That's
and
the killer.
Ginny.
To truly see how easy it is to manipulate the system, I decided to learn a bit about bribery.
They would probably
Using
get
part of the extra
way
budget
more
from our generous
done.
new sponsors,
Let's
I paid
be
some actors I
honest.
met in an LA improv class to get on the stand and corroborate my story.
I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes.
Marcus Dugan is a monster.
I had told them it was a paid audition for a hidden camera courtroom drama for True TV, and that some of the people in the room were producers.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I'm Rachel Brooks, 5'7", WME. I saw him do it. I saw him do it. Thank you.
And just a few days after that, Marcus Dugan was sentenced to life in prison. Another
The
blatant injustice from a
audition.
blatantly fucked up system.
Thank you.
Planting evidence and lying on the witness stand was so easy, it was horrifying. And it makes you wonder, how many
Being
other
an
people were sent to prison
actor,
on the
it's
basis
so
of pure lies?
humiliating in
Probably a
many
whole bunch,
ways.
or even more.
Having
I
like
didn't have time to go help those people.
done
in mid-season.
acting, I
had to
enjoy
talk to Milo's
acting.
defense team and tell them what I'd learned.
I think we all know this.
Traffic, poverty, disease. What do they have in common? They all happen on land. But what if we could live on the water? Terrain
Oh,
is a new concept
no.
for 21st century community living. This 30,000 square foot colony built on the Pacific Ocean is made complete with waterfront studio apartments starting at just $10,000 a month. And with amenities like a colony-wide bike highway, living on terrain is a no-brainer. So don't be left behind on land. Expand your terrain today. As a man reduced to multiple mansion confinement by the very same legal system that promised to protect him, Milo Reed appeared to represent everything wrong with justice in America. So when I sat in on a meeting with his
It's
defense
not
team,
one
I
for
expected to find a
one.
group of dedicated legal minds committed to proving
Both
his
heaven
innocence.
and
What I
hell
actually
want the
found was quite
apocalypse.
different.
Damn.
We think you should take the plea bargain.
Whoa.
That's so
What
real.
is a plea bargain?
It's an arrangement to avoid a very
Okay,
lengthy, very damaging
interesting.
trial.
I
The
love
defendant pleads
that.
guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for a far more lenient
When they
sentence.
built the basketball
obviously already
hoop
knew
in
that.
my
I was
local
only asking because
park,
it's a good
they brought
reporting
in the
tactic to get an
actor
extra
for
to say in his own
Neville
words. Oh, yeah,
Longbottom
totally. I
to
did that already,
open
for
it
sure.
for us.
Milo, you can't do this.
Hey, we can be watching you, sort of fly on the wall, sir, okay? Now please, let us hands. Milo, the
What?
evidence is really stacked against you.
Did he,
This
like-
is your best option.
I may
Is
not
he
be an
from
expert, but I know
that
that anyone who takes a plea
area?
deal is always 100%
Or someone
guilty
just
with no
had a
exceptions.
connection?
And Milo
They're
Reed
like,
wasn't
he
guilty.
has to
I was
be
against it right away,
here.
but even more so when I heard the terms.
That is
Okay, they're
wild.
offering a reduced sentence, 30 days of island confinement and a $10,000 fine. Now, you wouldn't be able to leave the Northern Hemisphere for 6 months, and you get about 9 hours of community service, but we might be able to get that down to 6 or 7. And of course, no talking to the media, no interviews, nothing like that.
Not even... I was pointing to myself.
No podcasts, nothing. But this is worth it, Milo. We really think you should take it.
I couldn't believe it. If Milo accepted this deal, he'd be seen as guilty, and this podcast would be done for. I'd given everything to this season, including $50 of my own money. To throw it all away now? Start from scratch with a new story? This wasn't an option. I was on the hook with Luminanny for 10 episodes. What would I do? I decided it was time to brainstorm strategies with my brand new
Somewhat
associate
near.
producer.
They're
Milo,
like,
what do you
close
think we
enough.
should do here?
I don't know, David.
That is
It's
so
tempting, but it's a
funny.
tough call.
Don't do this, Milo. You're an AP on this podcast now. We're in this together. Think
They're
about
like,
how much
this will
more
bring
interesting
in
this whole thing would be if
so
not to a
many
trial.
people.
Not to mention, if you take the deal, everyone sees you as a guilty man. In the eyes of the law, you'd be guilty.
I am worried that pleading guilty to killing my wife could hurt my career. I don't know what to do.
As we entered the large, imposing courtroom, no one knew what would happen. God might have known, if you believe in that sort of thing, but I usually don't. We sat down and a hush went over the room. Then we were asked to rise,
I
which is court talk
usually
for standing up,
don't.
and the judge entered.
And how does the defendant plead?
All eyes were on Milo and his defense team, and I'm guessing me too, probably. Would Milo take the plea deal, confess to
Me
killing his
too.
wife, and
Ugh.
subject himself to 6 brutal months of light probation?
I'm just
Would he
guessing.
become another
I was
victim
the
of the justice
center of
system?
attention.
Or would he stand and fight? The judge's question replayed over and over in my head. I knew what I needed to do. The defendant pleads not guilty.
David, what the hell are you doing?
What the hell I was doing? Next time on A Very Fatal Murder.
Now that you've enjoyed this free podcast episode, it's time to put an end to your pathetic freeloading and subscribe to The Onion today. You'll receive 12 monthly issues of our award-winning newspaper delivered straight to your mailbox. Visit
Your pathetic
membership.theonion.com now to
freeloading.
learn more.
Was that just me at the beginning of the stream? Oh, what is this AI? No thanks. Also, more shipping ideas. What would the combination of Lois Lane and like Selena Kyle be like, that's interesting. I feel like Selena Kyle would be able to like get so many secrets that then Lois would expose the world to. They could be a very effective team, I think. That could be hot. Also, Selena Kyle, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy. They just seem like they're like the showgirls that are just like very hot. They'd be very hot. Anyway, just saying. I'm encouraging any sort of fan fiction that is out there to be written, to be sent to me. I will not complain. Okay. I did want to show this. This is a recent innovation that I saw of J.D. Vance calling out people in the Israeli government for attacking the president, meaning Trump, but he keeps referring to him as the president. They shouldn't be attacking the president, Donald J. Trump. And he's also worried that the deal is going to fail and that Trump is putting it on him, that like if the deal fails. So what he had to say here, I think, is like what everyone has been thinking. But it is an interesting moment of some sort of, it's not clarity. It's obviously a tactic to be used. But anyway, I'll play this.
What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you have seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli
Vance
government,
is a fall guy.
I
Yeah,
might
it
not
is going
be
to fail.
attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere
He's a
left
snake.
in the entire world.
He
And
should
the
not be
second message
trusted.
I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path. But to some of
Bibi?
these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the
He's
defensive
uncomfortable.
weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel,
Which we've known,
is
but
not
even more
Donald
of
J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their
an
biggest
admission
problem
there.
is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
He's just doing
What I will
groundwork.
say,
Yeah.
and this does bother me, is that you have seen people within
course.
Bibi's cabinet.
Yeah, we know that nothing is done in good faith. He's not doing any of this in good faith. But, it is interesting for him to even say that, that the rest of the world does not like Israel. And it's like, well, maybe they shouldn't be engaging in a genocide and endless violence. But also it is essentially, it's this song and dance that always happens of like, well, we've protected you, but like no one likes you because you're using all these weapons that we are providing. So like people shouldn't like us. And guess what? People don't like the US, and for good reason. Remember when they oopsie doopsie added the editor for The Atlantic to that war planning group chat? I think it's not a whoopsie. I agree. I don't think it was a whoopsie at all. I'm glad you mentioned that. Because like even at the time when that was happening, people keep trying to say what they're doing is incompetence. And it's like, that's not to say that they aren't incompetent people, but that doesn't mean that their like corruption or like their capacity for planning is not completely inhibited. That like they're wanting these things to get out. They're wanting to like try to access this kind of leverage. It's very intentional. Also kind of like the aspect of with all of these more of these like attempts on Donald Trump that they're like, oh, how could anyone, like people are saying like, you're a conspiracy theorist for thinking that like the administration planned this. And I'm like, or we could be existing in an area that's in between where they know about people who have more inclinations of like what their politics are, what their plans are, and that they just don't do anything about it, like to stop it. So it's this type of controlled opposition. It's like, I think that is much more likely. And then they let people, they want people to be taken down anyway. So they have fall people. And then people are just viewed as collateral damage, but it's a sort of controlled event. It's performed incompetence, camouflaging cruelty. Now they have AI strategizing. Yeah, exactly. That it's not them just being stupid. It's them being overtly fascist. It's like they are stupid in many ways, but that doesn't mean that they don't know how to be strategic with their cruelty. Exactly. We're very much on the same page there. Okay, I did want to read a little bit more about being hijra. I have been putting out there that I am wanting more gurus as a chela, to have some elders and people teach me more of hijra history and ceremonies and practices. So continuing to put that out there, but also trying to learn even more. I want to provide more education that is out there. Like, there really is so much information that is like by hijra people that is suppressed through all of these algorithms on social media and like searches online and stuff. So it is very difficult to actually find hijra people, like content of hijra people actually speaking for themselves, and not in a way that is in this sort of like dehumanizing anthropologic perspective of like, oh, who are these people, this community of people, that it's also done in like a very colonized lens. So okay, I did want to share this. So this is by Alex Parmar Yee. So this is a background on their experience. People like me aren't transgender, right? This is a question that I and many trans folks have asked ourselves as we have begun exploring our identities. Yeah, I think especially non-binary people, of like viewing themselves as trans or not, and that sometimes like how you are viewing yourself is not necessarily indicative of how like the world is viewing you, you know? However, people like me, quote, can mean different things for each individual. It might refer to an individual's experience of dysphoria of their hobbies or their friends. For me, it was my ethnicity. Although born in London, I'm a second-generation immigrant of Chinese and Indian heritage, and growing up in the 90s and 2000s, or aughts, meant that the representation of transgender people and LGBTQIA2S+ people in general that I saw tended to be controversial. Or a lot of the time when it came to trans people having any sort of media representation, it was usually being like victims, like crime victims, like murder victims in Law and Order, in like these propaganda TV shows about cops. Which, by the way, this is something that I've been calling out for a while, and I saw a paper on this released recently that I want to read, about how there is this, like, over the past few years, even, like, especially after what happened with George Floyd, that there is much more of a preponderance and overrepresentation of Black cops in TV shows and movies and media as sort of this way to excuse the existence of cops and be like, oh, Black cops can't possibly be problematic or racist or have internalized biases, that I think is also like this tokenization that perpetuates a lot of harm, but also within the larger propaganda arm of trying to justify the existence of cops and be like, oh, they're hot and whimsical. Like with all of these shows, especially in the US, it's like, no, they're not. They're pigs. Okay? Moreover, going back here, those people were usually white. As I began to scratch the surface of transness online in my 20s, I saw the trans community indeed appeared to be mostly white folks. Well, online, the overrepresentation. As I got deeper, I discovered more about black trans pioneers, but I didn't encounter many brown South Asian trans siblings. Perhaps, I thought, being born and raised British had allowed me to assimilate with identities which aren't for people like me. Exploring my gender and my history. As my initial gender exploration and experimentation ended and I became more confident as a non-binary trans femme individual, love, I sought more information on trans people throughout history. I fell down an internet research rabbit hole and ended up on a page which surprised me. I learned about the hijra of the Indian subcontinent. Hijra are transgender, intersex, or eunuch people, and not necessarily excluded to all of these people. This is primarily like coming from more of like a genital perspective, which is inherently problematic when we are talking about any sort of transness or queerness, gender expansiveness. People who live in unique communities and are neither completely male or female. The origin of the Hidra's identity is featured with ancient Hinduism. Yeah, so that's from Harvard. I had felt like an outlier, both as a person of Indian descent and as a trans person, yet it turned out that I was expressing myself in a way that would have been familiar to my ancestors. The Hijras, also known as Aravani, Aruvani, Jokapa, or Kawaja Sira, are a transgender identity that have a recorded history going back over 4,000 years. Not all Hijras are necessarily Hindu, but this so-called third gender has been referenced in ancient Hindu texts like the Kama Sutra. So again, like, these are many of the things that I was like passing up. But there is, once again, this overrepresentation of content and study that is being uplifted and served in these algorithms rather than actually having it come from people who are in the community. The community, which is made up of trans, feminine, and intersex individuals, would often hold significant roles and be invited to give religious blessings. It may surprise those that feel religion and transgender people aren't compatible, that within Hinduism, there are even stories of transgender individuals and gods in some of the most important texts. Yeah. Hello, Stuart Little is my son. ACAB. Yeah, exactly. Fuck the police. Fuck the pigs. Wait, I have a point. Well, it's Baudrillard's point. The cop show is obviously fake, so we can compare to cops, and they seem real in comparison. Yep, hyper-reality legitimizes via imitation. Disneyland is a fake society, so society must be the real communal expression. Sorry, not sorry for the tangent. No, I feel like that's still like very related, especially as we're talking about like pride and liberation and like this aspect of like pride without police, pride without pigs, pride without cops. Like this is necessary to be deconstructing these false narratives that they are just feeding us constantly. Yeah, I think that's a really great portrayal of what is happening. Within the Mahabharata, one of the two major ancient Hindu texts, the story of Aravan is seen as the origin of Hidra's transgender identities. In the story of Krishna, one of the major Hindu gods advised Arjuna that his son Aravan must sacrifice himself as part of a ritual to win a war. Aravan agrees, providing that conditions are met, one of them being that he did not wish to die an unmarried man. Krishna sought a wife for Aravan, but no woman wished to become a widow. Excuse me, not a window. Instead, Krishna decided to take on their female form, known as Mohini, to marry Aravan and become his widow. Krishna's transformation is said to be the origin of trans people. I mean, this is like one of the many stories of transness. It exists in many different types of, like, not just Hindu, but it like has been associated with Hinduism, but more of like these larger like creation stories as well that are carried over from a lot of indigenous tribes in India. So there's like some co-opting happening there, just to call that out, but mostly associated with Hinduism. As a result, many hijras worship Aravan and is the origin of the term Aravani. There are other stories throughout Hinduism which feature gods taking on other genders and teaching on gender being a human construct, like the story of Shikandi, which is featured in the Trans Plus History Week workbook. Yeah, that's another story that I would like to read, maybe tomorrow. I think this rich history of what may be one of the oldest recorded trans communities in the world is a real lesson that trans people are nothing new and have always been here. Yeah, exactly. It shows us that if we go far enough back, we're present in the myths and stories that form the ancient foundations of our civilizations. For me and my trans South Asian siblings, this also proves wrong those within our own communities who we feel learned to be trans from Western culture. Yeah, that is often a concept of like that there are many people of color who believe that like queerness in general is like this liberal sort of thing, like this white liberal sort of thing that is not actually coming from indigenous tradition. Armed with the knowledge of the hijras, I asked relatives about them. They knew of them, but their understanding was that they were looked down upon within society in India. Well, looking into it myself, I heard that many hijras face discrimination and stigma and rely on sex work and begging to live. Much of this is a legacy of British colonialism. Yeah, because that is systematized, enforced by policy. British colonialism, which saw them as a, quote, breach of public decency, close quote. Laws such as the only recently repealed Anti-Homosexuality Act, Section 377, and numerous specifically anti-hijra laws lead to their further marginalization. There have been changes to laws in post-colonial India, including legal recognition of a third gender in some documents. Some Hindi hijra communities are respected for the blessings they can provide, or their roles as dancers or religious figures in ceremonies. Yeah, so we also have to call out that there have been many queer groups, organizing groups in India that have said that while it may look like it's better on its face to be legally recognized, people have to go through, like what many trans people do throughout the world, all of these processes to justify their third gender in order to have it as part of their legal documentation, and that the legal documentation, like that process, is a way to surveil people, to control them, and then to oppress them and essentially have them like registered on a list of people to be targeted. So calling that out as well. Also, when we are existing in this world of Hindutva, this Hindu nationalism, where Hinduism is used to justify the caste system and oppressing the masses in the name of having like proximity to godliness with Brahmanism, which like my family is Brahmin. So like me trying to engage in hijra identity and like Brahmin identity of like actually taking it back to what it should mean, which is a decolonizing of it, of being of service to people, of like if you have gifts for something, then you should be serving people and not be using it as a way to oppress people. But we also need to call out that there are plenty of hijra people who are of other religions, who are not just Hindu, that there is this gender expansiveness that exists beyond Hinduism, and especially when it comes to Muslim hijra people, that there are plenty of people who do ceremonies or like practice traditions, but they are also practicing Muslims. So it's not just based in the religion of Hinduism. That being said, many hijra are still forced to live as outcasts within Indian society, a common experience for trans people globally. So looking at my world as a trans person of Indian descent, does that make me a hijra? What we can learn from this history. What can we learn from this history? Wow, my reading's all over the place today. I wouldn't consider myself a practicing Hindu, and I don't think I'd be good at providing blessings or dancing at religious festivals. But the thing is, the hijras, that is something that I feel like has always like been part of like how I was built, is like this inclination to be dancing, but like not in the ways of like being like conditioned to dance, like in Western styles of dancing, and that there is like a form of like rejuvenation and life and spirituality and like language and even like magic at times in dancing in this shared experience, and like that there are certain types of art that like surpass human language. But the thing is, the Hidra's way of life is just a flavor of being trans, one that has stood the test of time. For all trans people, the Hijras perhaps allow us to see parallels and aspects of our own trans experience. One thing that struck me in learning more about the Hijras is the units they all lived in within. Nope. They all lived within. Sisters and aunties supporting each other. Yeah, not necessarily like sisters, but yeah, chelas and gurus supporting each other and becoming their authentic selves and navigating society. Also, this sort of like elder mentality of teaching younger generations about tradition so that it can be preserved. In the West, the term found family feels like the right label for this. Yeah. I think back to the communities I joined on Instagram that supported each other in gender expression. Even today, I rely on close-knit group chats and queer picnics to remain connected with my trans siblings. Society will continue to evolve, but many aspects that have been part of the hijra way of life for thousands of years continue in our trans communities of today around the world. History shows that these aspects echo throughout civilizations, such as with the Galilei of ancient Rome. The hijras taught me that being trans and Indian is enduring. Hijra can teach all trans people, or the hijras. It's like, do you not identify as hijra then? I think that's what I originally thought upon reading this. That their experiences are enduring. The hijras can teach society that trans people are enduring. Yeah. So maybe they don't personally identify as hijra. Yeah. Snaps. Okay. I did want to read this as well. It is coming from the perspective more that many people assume about hijra people, is that it is people who are assigned male at birth and are trans femme, but it also is this fundamental misunderstanding of queerness, and also misunderstanding that like it's still operating within this gender binary, right? And not understanding that there is a third gender of being like both masculine and feminine and neither of these things, that it is extremely expansive and diverse group, and that often trans women are just categorized as hijra rather than being viewed as women, that can also be used to negate people's personal experiences and personhood, humanity. I'm appreciating the topic. Hard to engage in state employee. That's okay. No pressure. This is me just going off. Okay, so this is Hijras, the age-old transgender community in South Asian culture by Kirti Shanagar. Or Shangar, whoops. This is on the site Reclamation, Reclaim Your Voice. Growing up in an Indian Malaysian household, I'm glad I was constantly surrounded by my culture, whether it was through stories my grandmother told me during sleepless nights, or the many vibrant pictures and paintings that decorated the walls of my house. I always had a reminder of my heritage. I can't even remember a time before that. As you can tell by now, my home was practically a monument of Indian memorabilia. As I grew older and my curiosity started to flourish, I decided to delve deeper and uncover the lesser-known stories of my heritage. Here, I'm going to go up a little bit. Hello, Tan. Welcome. Subscribe for 5 months. Thank you very much. This helps me a lot. I appreciate you. Happy Pride. Also talking more about hijra identity. I love this art. So beautiful. By Madhura Kamat. The ones I didn't just hear in a regular old conversation, one of the main things that coincided with my heritage that astounded me as I grew older was how prominent transgender culture was in Indian history. Not even just culture, but identity as well. Yes. Exactly. Queer applause. I don't hit my mic. How are you doing? I know that things have been pretty rough for you lately. It's radical to engage in self-care. Hope you're doing okay. I recall going to a variety of Hindu religious celebrations and being mesmerized by a number of people adorned in colorful garments and saris dancing to their heart's content. Most of them were transgender women, intersex, or simply just men dressed in women's clothing. All of them, so like people in drag, or people just like whatever the gender expression is, all of them celebrating religious deities through carefully configured choreography and at the same time acting out different characters, basically giving many of us as bystanders a visual representation of the stories we were told as kids. You see, I never thought people who were transgender, intersex, or dressing up as the opposite sex were abnormal in any way. It had become very much normalized to me. And then also that gets into, okay, so like, what does that even mean in dressing up as the opposite sex? I saw it in my comic books when reading about the many gods in Hinduism, in artworks, or even on TV. Yeah, because the gods in Hinduism are queer as fuck. When they used to play live performances. I remember so distinctively how in awe I was of their ability to show the most specific expressions through their eyes and project it to the audience. It was all merely an art form for me, and I solely believed that they were just born that way. Yeah. It was only as I expanded my horizons that I realized how much stigma there was towards transgender and intersex individuals, or like non-binary, gender expansive people. They were constantly being ridiculed and demeaned by my peers, which always perplexed and angered me. I knew, however, that in order to understand why they were getting severely mistreated, I needed to figure out the history behind intersex and transgender individuals in Indian culture first, and why it had been put on a normal footing for me from such a young age. The Indian transgender community, also known as hijras, have been part of the subcontinent since the beginning of its civilization. They are said to have existed for nearly 4,000 years. The earliest they were mentioned was in the ancient text Kama Sutra, where they were referred to as the third sex. This was written sometime between 400 BCE and 200 CE. In addition, they have played significant roles in religion. In Hinduism, hijras are known to have been granted a boon by Lord Rama, so this is another origin story within Hinduism, after impressing him with their loyalty and devotion towards him. Yeah, this is in the Ramayana, that story and text. This boon allows them to confer blessings on people during auspicious occasions, and still to this day, people invite them to their homes to bless newborn babies and newlyweds. The boon originates from the Badhai, in which hijras sing, dance, and give blessings. Subsequently, some of the hijra communities in India also prefer to call themselves Kinar or Kiner, which are mythological beings that excel at song and dance. Oh, what, you say? Song and dance? Anyway. There are also many hijras that practice Islam, as well as incorporating certain aspects of Hinduism, which is also why we're saying that, like, hijra identity exists outside of religious context, especially, like, imposed Hinduism. Even though there is some syncretism, Gayatri Reddy, an anthropologist, has stated that a hijra does not practice Islam differently from other Muslims, and argues that their syncretism does not make them any less Muslim. Yeah. Oh, this is so pretty. The hijra community has been recognized all across South Asia, such as India, Pakistan, and Nepal, and they really thrived during the pre-colonial era. I mean, even beyond that in like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh as well, which is why we talk about Desi identity, which is more about ethnicity and extending beyond nation states and borders. Sadly, it was short-lived. In Pakistan, Franciscan travelers in the 1650s noticed the presence of, quote, men and boys who dress like women, end quote, in Thada, which led them to think it was the sign of the city's corruption. Yeah, of course they did, because they're losers. Furthermore, during the era of the British Raj, many of the authorities tried to eradicate hijras because they were perceived as a breach of public decency. Yeah, Victorian values are like just so tasteless and also evil. Colonial, obviously, which that means the same thing. Tasteless and evil most of the time just means colonizer sensibilities. Anti-hijra laws were repealed later on, but a law outlawing castration, a core part of the hijra community, still remained untouched. Yeah, still all of this like fear-mongering around like what it means to actually have like gender-affirming care that is demonized everywhere in the world when we're talking about transness. Furthermore, the British colonizers also placed the hijras under the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871 and labeled them a criminal tribe, which included, and like what does it mean to be criminal? Which included strict monitoring, compulsory registration, and stigmatization. After gaining independence from the British, they were denotified from the Criminal Tribes Act in 1952. However, the centuries-old stigma still remained and carried its way to many other nations and cultures. This false discriminatory notion was constantly being preached and taught to so many for so long from people of higher power and colonizers that it eventually stuck and was probably why I was hearing it all the time. It's saddening, but now I know what the transgender and hijra community have been dealing with for so long. Their objectives were twisted and made to look wrong. Of course, there have been huge leaps and bounds in terms of making the hijra transgender community feel more accepted in general. Bills and policies have been implemented that benefit them, but the stigma still lingers. Or how I mentioned earlier, policies that are used to look like they're making progress, but are actually used to further oppress people. Generally, they're still socially and economically challenged. They face severe discrimination and don't have as much access to education and jobs. Hello, as I was just talking about job search shit. A lot of them have been forced to succumb to sex work, which leads to a plethora of human rights issues because the sex work they fall into tends to be very abusive and often brutal. Which this is not to say that, like, anyone who is engaged in sex work is not, is compelled to do it, but often that can be the case. Additionally, transgender people in most parts of the world still don't get sufficient healthcare, housing, employment, and any bureaucracy which makes it impossible to place them into male or female gender categories. Interesting. Perhaps on resumes or these formal application processes and feeling like you are not fitting nicely into either of these categories. I think there is still so much that can be done to help the transgender community all over the world until all the derogatory actions made towards them can be eradicated. Personally, I feel the hijra community is a testament to the sexual diversity and identity diversity, gender diversity that is fundamental yet often forgotten or not appreciated in Indian culture and all cultures for that matter. Happy Pride. Anyway, that was one of the examples that I was able to find that was from a Desi person. It sounds like they are not hijra themselves, but also that is not just repeating what most things are just being said online, like regurgitating a lot of these like articles and stuff. I like that that was different for this one. And that we got another origin story from the Ramayana, and also talking about the Islamic experience as well. Okay. So, strong book recommend, Narcopolis by Jeet Taylor. Ooh, okay. I'm gonna write this down. Where's one of my pens? I usually have them right here. Here, I'm gonna type this then. Narcopolis. Thank you very much. Hey, very cool. Great recommendations from the chat. There's a third gender Hindu perspective. That's very cool. I know that was one of the things that was like more revolutionary about Monkey Man that Dev Patel was in. I mean, Patel is a very Brahmin name, and that like he is even able to have the opportunity to be acting in the first place, probably because he comes from a privileged caste. So calling that out. But I did appreciate that. I know there's like many criticisms of Monkey Man. I think they're warranted, but I also really appreciated, like, just in general, there was even a reference to hijra people. I'm doing good, by the way. I need rest. I'm glad you're doing all right. Take care of yourself. I liked that movie. I also enjoyed, I think the soundtrack especially, I really enjoyed. I liked that there was more of this kind of, like John Wick Indian perspective, but I think Rohan Davis has like a critique of Monkey Man. Maybe I'll show this tomorrow. I'll find that video and then we can go over it. But what he was saying, I think, is very accurate. But also, like, still exposing more people to like different identities. So, like, holding that nuance there, I think, is important. Okay, so we are going to move ahead to Banned Book Club. I have not done the reading just with life, but I did want to provide more context for the book itself and finish this interview with Toni Morrison on the Bluest Eye. That, like, this interview that we have been watching, she was talking about Paradise, the book specifically, that was the most recently published one at the time of this interview, but we have yet to get, and like a lot of the concepts that she talks about are applicable to the Bluest Eye, which is why I've been showing it as well. I mean, anytime we can hear from Toni Morrison is a privilege and a treat, but she is about to get into more of like her commentary on the Bluest Eye that I want to show. Hitting the sack in a few since we're 2 hours ahead. Yeah, do what you need to do. I'm glad that you're setting that for yourself, that boundary. But I appreciate you. This is, just as like a quick update. Oh, this is before I like bring down my screen. It's like revealing too much for me. This is the bracelet that I have so far. I have a couple of inches that I'm needing to finish. But then when I'm done, I will be sending this your way. Thank you for your support. If anyone who is a subscriber on Twitch or on Patreon would like to request a bracelet with their colors that they like, you can. So just throwing that out there. Paradise? Yes. So Paradise is in this, like the series that she has of starting with Beloved, that he's calling Beloved, which is like stupid. And then it goes Jazz and then Paradise, which I've only read parts of Jazz. I haven't read it all the way through. Like, I've just read excerpts of it, and I haven't read Paradise. So I need to be reading more of that. Her writing is just astounding. Okay, so we're at 26:24. I probably need to refresh this so it doesn't do like that weird thing of like, content can't load. Okay, I'm glad I went over that. Wait, was it 24:26 or 26:24? I'll go back to 24:26. I think that's what it was.
Hold on it. and that everybody knows what it is.
And we should say,
When everything was read as a sociological track, everything was read as though it had
Pair
this
of dice.
agenda, as though there was
Pair
only
of
one
dice
black
instead of
narrative.
paradise.
And there are hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, and that's what's reflected in the reviews.
You can see
of
how
other
messy
people's books and
my
also in
desk
mine,
is right
so that
now.
when I see
I
the
was
differences
not
between
prepared
those
to
two
show.
reviews you mentioned, or 3 or 4, it's tantamount to me that there is no single black narrative, and that one person has a hold on it, and that everybody knows what it is.
and we should say, that's perfect. That's better. That's
It's
much
infinitely
better.
better.
Hosanna.
Yes.
The idea of writing about race, or the absence of race. Phil Moyers, I think,
He just keeps going back to that, which is, ugh.
once asked you the question, can you imagine writing a novel that's not centered about race? And you said, absolutely.
Yes.
Will you?
That's what he asked me. I think, you see, I answered the question he didn't pose. You know, Tolstoy writes about race.
Yeah.
All the time. So does Zola, so does James Joyce. Now, if anybody can go up to an imaginary James Joyce and say,
If a messy
"You write
desk
about
is the
race
sign
all
of a
the
messy mind, then a clean
It's
desk
central in
is
your
is
novels.
LeBron.
when are you going to write about what?
Yeah.
Because you see, the person who asks
Thank
that
you for
question
that
doesn't understand that he
validation.
is also,
I like
he or
that.
She is also racist. So to ask me when am I going to stop, or if I can, is to ask a question that
Yeah, it can be
in a
cluttered, but
sense,
yeah,
is its own answer.
that is my mind.
Yes, I can write about white people. White people can write about black people. Anything can happen in art. There are no boundaries there. Having to do it or having to prove that I can do it is what was embarrassing or insulting. In this book, I did.
It was insulting that people, help me understand, what was insulting? The idea that you felt like you had to prove that you could write without...
Yeah, the question was posed as though it were a desirable thing to do, to write about white people or to write not about race. That's what that means to me.
Yeah.
And that
Which
it was
if we're
a
writing about
difficult thing
people,
to do,
then
a
we are writing
higher
about
level
race.
of artistic endeavor, or it was more important,
Because of
and that I was still
society.
writing about marginal people, and why don't I come into the mainstream?
Aren't you importing too much into the question?
Maybe.
I think so.
Well, what else could it be, Charlie? What does that mean? What does that question mean?
If it's saying she's
You
like
tell me.
reading too much into
If I'm
it.
reading too much.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I don't think it probably means, I didn't ask the question, so I don't think it probably means, but I don't think it had to do about you were marginalizing by not.
That's what it is, though.
It only works
You dumb bitch.
if I can go to William Styron. Well, maybe not William Styron because he has done it.
She's telling that
somebody.
she's actually
major
getting to the heart
white
of the
and say,
issue.
as a journalist.
Can you write about black people?
That's right. Can I say that? What kind of question is that to put to Ed Doctorow, who has done it, by the way?
Sure.
But I mean, if I can say, when are you going to write about black people to a white writer, if that's a legitimate question
I'm a
to a
messy
white
desk
writer,
enjoyer as
then
long
it
as
is a
the
legitimate
mess is
question
in
to me. I
motion,
just don't
not
think it is.
accumulating. That is true.
You know, so
Yeah,
you
for
have
me,
to go,
most
has
of
to
the
be
time
pulled
it's just
inside
like
out.
things
If it-
shifting
in other words,
around
it's not a
that
literary
I may not
question.
always like
It has nothing to do with the literary imagination.
get it back to its
It's
home.
a sociological question that should not be put to me. I couldn't ask that of any writer who was, I wouldn't ask it of a black writer when you're going to write about white people. Now, maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me now or later if I've blown it up all out of proportion. I don't think so. I just don't know what the question
No.
means except what I think it means. You think it may just be a little question, a little curious, small incidental question. When are you going to...
Also saying that like people are like
Maybe I'm
overthinking
responding
things
because I
or
have
just
had
like reading
reviews in the
too into
past
it. It's like
that have accused me of not writing
she
about
is
people. I remember a review of Sula in which
such
the
a
reviewer
vast
said, "This is all
mind.
well and good, but
Why
one
would
day
you be saying
she,
that to her
we,
in any
will
sort
have to
of
face up
capacity?
to the real responsibilities and get mature and write about the real confrontation for black people, which is white people. As though our lives have no meaning and no depth without the white gaze. And I've spent my entire writing life trying to make sure that the white gaze was not the dominant one in any of my books. And the people who helped me most arrive at that kind of language were African writers. Chinua Achebe, Bessie Head. Those writers who could assume the centrality of their race because they were Africans. And they didn't explain anything to white people. Those questions were incomprehensible to them. Those questions that I would have as a minority living in an all-white country like the United States. But when I read the poetry of César, or the poetry of Senghor, or the novels particularly, Things Fall Apart was more important to me than anything. Only because
Thinking
there
takes
was a
energy
language,
that could
there
be
was a
spent
posture,
shopping
there
and
were the parameters.
internalizing.
I could step in now, and I didn't have
certainly.
to be consumed by or be concerned by the white
Most
gaze.
people are not
That was the
interested
liberation
in
for me.
this
It has
topic.
nothing to do with who
Also, the
reads
capacity
books.
for
Everyone, I hope,
certain
of any
populations
race,
are
any
forced to
gender, any
engage in
country.
more critical
But my
thinking just out of
sovereignty
survival.
and my authority
Being able to
as a
hold
racialized
nuance
person
as
had
well.
to be struck immediately with the very first book.
Not
And it was
always,
strange,
but
because in this country, many books, particularly then, 40s, 50s, you could feel the address of the narrator over my shoulder, talking to somebody else, talking to somebody white. I could tell because they were explaining things that they didn't have to explain if they were talking to me. It was that. So it's profound for me. So that you may be right, maybe I'm over-dramatizing the whole question, which was innocent enough, because the problem of being free to write the way you wish to.
the concept
without
of
this
white
other racialized gaze is a
interviewers
serious one for an
being
African
in their
American fighter.
feelings that she's answering the question
I
that
think this is one of those
was
times
actually being
where what you
posed.
just said, you gave and ennobled an answer, regardless of the significance
that's good.
of the question. Let me stay with a couple things about Paris. Let me go to your life. We've done this before, but I want to, no, stay with me.
She's like, we're not going to talk about my book.
Born in Ohio. We've talked about this before. Father was a welder. Mother was a homemaker.
Yes.
Howard University. Cornell for a master's in art. MA. Back to Howard to teach. Came to New York. Began to work at Random House in publishing. Began to write. Why? Because it has been said, a sense of loneliness, a sense of what?
I've given several different answers, one of which is loneliness, one of which is wanting to read something like that. I wanted to read that book that I wrote, and I couldn't find it anywhere. But
The
certainly
Bluest
there
Eye.
was a sense that there was a void.
That was her first
Wasn't as
book
big as
that
I
she
thought it was,
published.
because there were other writers that
I mean,
had
she
contributed
was
to
a publisher, so she actually helped publish other books, but the first book that she authored and got published. The substructure that normalizes, why write about subjects that interest or affect you, is very abnormal. Yeah.
that whole area. Paul Marshall was one, for example. But I wanted to I wanted to put centrally this little person who never appeared in American literature except as a joke, which is a little black girl with no redeeming qualities whatsoever, except she was lovely. And starting was sort of a fluke. I joined a little writing group, and they were fun. They were professional writers. I wasn't.
It gave you a place to go,
Gave
among
me a
other
place
things.
to go, and they had good food. They were
Right.
great company, and they encouraged me, and I wrote a little story that
Love
subsequently
that.
became The Bluest Eye. But the fact was, once I began to put that little story together, just doing it at night, when the children were asleep, or early in the morning before they woke, it was just an interior life, a stretch, a safe place or a dangerous place that I always wanted to have near me, always wanted to have access to, never wanted to be without an idea that was narrative or novelistic, never. And the few times that I have not had an idea to fret after I've completed a book have been very bleak times for me, indeed. So for me, it was a kind of coherence, I think. And I learned how to do it better and better and better.
You said that you didn't really think of yourself as a writer until Songs of Solomon.
Yeah, professionally.
Professionally.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
I knew
and
writing
already
was central to my life, to the way I thought, the
so
way I was.
remarkable to
But
begin with,
there's a difference between
the
that and
quality of
publishing.
her art.
So after I had done Song of Solomon, I began, at someone else's insistence, I have to tell you, to call myself a writer. Up till then, I was an editor who wrote, or a teacher who wrote. I never put writing first.
You spoke eloquently about language in your Nobel speech. Eloquently.
It's because
The
she had so
power
much
of language.
reverence of what that meant, of what it
You
means
must
to be
have
a
thought about
writer.
this and struggled
Because
with
it
this.
means a lot to her.
Tell me a little bit about the gift of language. Is it just something that comes from
You're either built that way or you're not.
hard labor? Or does it come somewhere else having to do with some other combination of things that give one the capacity to make words march?
I think it's both. I think there's some people and some cultures that are just in love with language. And they treasure it, and they play with it, and they like it, and all of its intricacy, and its fun, and its power, and its magic. Writing, sometimes there are people who effortlessly can do that, some of the time. The rest of it is really hard work. For me, it's revision. It's going over it and over it until it doesn't look written, until it looks as though, if you surrender to it, as though it's just rolling out before you. And you don't sort of, you may stop and relish a
Writing
phrase
is
or two,
hard.
but
Writing
you
critique
really
is less hard. Yeah.
surrounded
It's much
by it,
easier to
and
criticize
it's
than
not
it is
waving its
to
hand at you so
create.
much. But the feeling, the emotion,
Like with any sort of art form.
intellectual
But
response to that language
I think writing
ought
is
to
one
be
of the most
very
difficult art
complicated,
forms to
very
engage in.
And when that happens, then there's a
It's so
wonderful
like mentally
between the
laborious.
of the text
Like any sort of
and the mind and
storytelling,
imagination of the reader.
like whether
That
that's
doesn't happen a
using
lot,
language
but that's the struggle.
orally
That's
or written.
effort.
Should the reader have to struggle as much as the writer?
No, not as much.
They have to struggle. The reader ought to have to struggle somewhat.
Sure, I like to.
Yeah.
When I read, I want to work at it. I don't want to just have the writer tell me everything, and I'm passive. I like active participation.
I'm not a writer. I'm a shit poster who
in the
writes,
text.
but want to
I
become
like to
a
wonder
writer
about
who
the
shit
sentences.
posts.
I like to
I mean,
see the
I think you
panorama.
should start calling yourself
I'm in there. I don't
a
want to be shut out.
writer who shit
And I
posts.
think I'm
Have like the
sometimes wrong
power
about
in
this, but I think
like
readers
already
the
thinking
same
of
thing,
yourself
although I
as
have
like
a lot of evidence to the contrary.
what you're
But
wanting to
people say,
become.
What is that about?
That's something
What
I'm
happened?
currently trying to work on.
And sometimes readers
I had
know
a
more
big
than we do.
resistance
Oh, I
in
know
like
they
calling
do.
myself an
About
artist
But
in
all
any
kinds of things.
capacity
Came from
while I
where it
like
came from.
constantly like
Listen,
have
in
this
Paradise, for
impulse
example, I have a little strange
to
scene
create art
in the book. And
that I'm like, that's
the
what
people in it are wearing
that
clothes
means.
of a certain
Just
color.
because I'm not like making a
Later
living
on,
from
there's
art
another
doesn't mean that
scene
I
that
don't
takes place in that
have
same
like
spot.
the soul
And the
of
colors,
an
the
artist.
palette is the same.
I don't know.
Same colors are used. Now, the reader didn't have to know that or think about that. But I know that subliminally speaking, those colors are going to echo one another. And that whether the connection is overt or covert, the reader gets the connection just by color coding. And I know that if I say stars were so heavy it was disgraceful, that they know what disgraceful jewelry looks like and they can transfer that to the sky. I know that. And then I rely on a very fecund imagination that I know readers have. They really have it. And to play toward that, not the emotion, but toward the imagination, is the excitement for me.
Winning the Nobel Prize, what did that mean to you?
Well, I felt very I felt as though I felt very representative. I really did.
Of patriotic, of
man.
American letters and
I did. I felt very Ohioan. I felt very African American. I felt women had won. I really thought, and as a matter of fact, I said, we won.
We won.
We won. I said that on the phone a couple of times. When people called me
Yeah,
to
we won.
congratulate me, I said, we won.
One for the tradition of American letters.
Yes, all sorts of things. I don't know whether I needed to do that in order to
Well,
shoulder it,
It's a little
but
bit of
nevertheless,
this
I did.
a little bit of this in the Time magazine story about it carries with it not baggage, but it carries with it something that you will forever experience. I mean, we know the first line in your obituary, don't we?
Uh-huh. Unless some
Nobel laureate
brave
Toni
soul
Morrison
defies.
who lived to be 150,
That's the second line,
having
right?
having finished her 50th novel.
Yeah, that's true. It's there. I mean, it's marvelous to have won that prize.
But does it set up? Go ahead.
Yeah, but it has a downside.
What is it?
Expectations are different. People behave differently, and sometimes it's given so late in your life you can't really get too many things out
Yep.
afterwards. Although I'm happy to say that
There
now
are plenty
some
of
prizes-
awards before that she got overlooked for, so that doesn't mean that she wasn't deserving of those things. I appreciate art. I'm a bit more of a systemic thinker and can fix machines or computers, but my systemic analysis compels communicating my findings. I mean, it depends on like what we're defining as art. It's like I think there is art to being able to like be able to see these kinds of systems and create language in a way that accurately reflects your observations. It's like it doesn't necessarily mean it's like always flowery in nature, but yeah, I think it just kind of depends on how you're defining art. That's art to me.
Boy, Oye, Eric Walcott, those are youngish people who are still writing brilliantly and beautifully.
Do you think this is your best work?
So far.
So far?
Yeah.
Because?
It's the one where everything I know about writing, I have at my disposal now. So I can choose not to use certain things and choose to use others. I don't know if it's the most affecting book or the most, enjoyable, but I was writing at the top in many places in this book. I was writing
at the top
of my stuff, the top of my game. I was writing.
Tony's on her game.
Yeah, it'll get better though.
You know that.
Oh yeah.
Because
I work at that. I don't do other things. I don't have this really interesting life. That's what I do, and I just want to do it better the next time. I understand that I have maybe 2 careers. I have the writing career. Then now. This is the first book since the Nobel Prize, so it's like I have a whole nother, like a writing career. But for me, I just want the arc. I just want to stay in it and do it differently, different obstacles, different technical obstacles, different ideas to explore. Some things are unresolved for me in some of the books. I have to rework them again. The pleasure I took and still have and being able to withhold racial markers is for me an enormous leap. An enormous leap. It's not just not saying who. You realize you have to not say so much, and you have to write about the characters so profoundly, so intricately, so much interior life, that it doesn't matter. And you don't have recourse to all of those easy phrases that literature is full of, and I have taken advantage of when you describe racialized people. You just can't say it anymore.
What do you mean, racialized people?
Well, you can't say things about their hair. When they walk into a room and other people look at them, what do they respond to? How do they talk? They're very culturally
specific. The color of their eyes.
That's right.
Speaking of earlier books.
That's right. They're very culturally specific things that I could rely on and some I would withhold. But to write that way and not have it bland is it's difficult. That means you can't talk about their parents in a certain way, or their lovers in a certain way, or where they went to school. You just have to stop it. If you are trying to withhold it, as I was, and do something that I thought was hard, which was to have these 3-dimensional, very well realized characters who were memorable, and that you know everything about them except that one small thing.
This was her
Which
first
is
book.
like,
Yeah, The Bluest Eye was her
looking
first book.
for the white whale.
Isn't that insane? This is when I say, like, you're either born with, like, having an inclination to, like, I think we all have, like, artists within ourselves. That sounds cheesy, but I think that's true. But there are certain people who are just, like, born to do certain things. And like you either like have that kind of eye and talent and like vastness of imagination and wealth of knowledge and curiosity and just wisdom and being able to like spin it in a way that's like aesthetically pleasing, but like commentary on like social systems and stuff. It's like she truly is like one of the greatest artists of all time. That is my opinion, and I will hold to that. Of like reading this book, even the little excerpts that I've read on stream, like just goes to show like in one sentence, she is able to have all of those aspects, like just entire worlds within a few words. That is just astounding. And like, you can't teach someone that. you can help people refine a craft, but you either like have a gift for something that I think you can develop over time. I think it's just like what comes naturally to you. Like you either have like the soul of someone who is like built to create this, and like I said before, it can be refined, or like practice like really helps. I think that makes it so like we can all do a lot of different kinds of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're like you feel called to do something.
Withholding it. It was just interesting. It was interesting enterprise for me. And I don't think it, I think it makes the book more interesting. It's not necessary to engage oneself in that at all.
But it makes it more interesting.
But it makes
if you
it more
don't know
interesting.
And you go through the experience of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
We aired this conversation on Martin Luther King holiday, Monday evening. Do you feel that you have a mission with respect to the African American community?
I have a debt.
A debt.
Big debt.
Also the fact that they're like, we're airing this interview on Dr. King Day, of like, okay, so if we're talking about what it means to be humanizing people more, how about we don't just like fall into themes of like her work, the words of Dr. King, like these should be talked about like year round. Like who would imagine? Certainly not these oppressive structures. But that's like, I think that's also where that like look comes from. That she was like, okay, so you're just saying like, I'm just for this particular category of like, this is the day that we're talking about Black Americans specifically, rather than just saying like, oh, we're talking about Toni Morrison's like fucking mind-boggling art. Here we're talking about the very real, like hard-won things, and just like these larger like fights for movement and humanizing people that like Dr. King was fighting for, that it like all has to be categorized to one day. Art pushes boundaries, have to find and define them before you can press on them. Yes, exactly. Art should challenge. It's like that is what makes some of the best art. That's why like seeing a lot of things, like I can be kind of like a contrarian by nature. I'm like I resonate with like being a brat in many ways. I was called that when I was younger, and that was like one of the most offensive things to me, but like reclaiming that and being like, that's very revolutionary to be like challenging structures. But also like it shouldn't be easy. Art shouldn't, I mean, it can be like, that can be nice, but like art should be trying to like do something, in my mind. I know Oscar Wilde says that like, as with aestheticism, that we shouldn't have anything that is practical be art. Otherwise it isn't considered art. But I think he didn't even really fully believe that. That like there are plenty of like artistic things that are like practical and like help people feel compelled to act. And the most interesting art creates is like these like surprising things that it's not just like repeated over time, where we have these same kinds of like tropes and symbolism, that when we have these unlike things that are paired together, it creates something interesting. Hearing you say all that has me reaching for a book my English teacher once recommended us. Station 11, if you recognize it. I've heard of this. I don't know if I've seen it. Let's see. Yeah, this doesn't look familiar to me. Himesh Patel. Another Patel in there. Interesting. Would you recommend? You also provide great recommendations. Thank you all for having excellent taste and knowledge, by the way.
big debt. Part of it is just because I was raised by generous people who gave me a lot and told me I had a debt, that I had to make a way for people who came behind me. That was my obligation, whatever it was. Partly that. Partly also because a lot of people put themselves in harm's way in order to make it easier for my children. And they are no longer with us. And
people like Martin.
Oh, exactly. You know, I go into the voting booth, and a lot of people say you shouldn't vote because, there's no real choice, this person is not good. I go in there as a very personal ritual. I don't care much of the time where those levers go down. I make choices.
It's about the act.
It's absolutely.
Participation.
For Fannie Lou Hamer.
People who.
That's for her.
People who gave so you had that opportunity.
That's right. And I will not be turned away from any voting booth, and I vote regularly because of her. They will not have hurt her as they did because she wanted to vote, and then I don't vote. For me, it's like a small prayer by the side of the road. That's what I do.
What do you think of the president's effort at a race dialogue headed by John Hope Franklin, Dr. John Hope Franklin?
Oh, John Hope Franklin is superb. I mean, he's a class act.
Well, let me ask the question specifically. What ought to be our agenda about race in America? And how should we go about that agenda on this holiday dedicated to Dr. King?
Maybe part of it should be that you stop asking
I'm
dumbass questions
about it. When I think of something like President Clinton appointing a race council. On the other hand, there have been so many. But this one might do something more. I'm more interested in local interventions that Black people themselves are doing with each other. As a consequence of, I don't know what, Million Man Marches and so on, there's an enormous, wonderful wave after wave of personal interventions in communities, which is very encouraging.
Individuals taking responsibility.
Yeah, going into
like paradoxes or koans to remind me to hold conflictions,
getting in their
flatten.
business.
Like appeal to authority is a
the way they
logical
used to do
fallacy, but
years
isn't
ago.
pointing at
Stay in
Greek
your
logical
business. Go to your
fallacies
office.
and appeal to authority. I mean, yeah, that too. Well, do we even consider a fallacy?
That is
Who
more
is telling
heartbreaking
us?
than, some of the
And
larger
why?
ones. And that's the kind of
I think constantly questioning. That is a good thing, and we are actively dissuaded from that. Even from like earliest childhood of like if you ask too many questions, how it just gets to be exhausting for adults, and like it can be like that's real. But like I think we'll save this. Let's finish this tomorrow for Culture Corner. Like they're moving beyond the book too. I was told all the time that I asked too many questions. And often I think it's because I asked questions that people didn't necessarily know the answers to. That's not to be like, oh, I was like a precocious little child, which maybe I wasn't, certainly. But I think many children are. And that kids tend to ask questions that make adults uncomfortable because they have not been... they have not internalized as much. I mean, depending on like who they are and where they come from, you know, and like how much brainwashing is involved, but that like a lot of kids show that they have yet to be propagandized into just doing whatever adults do without thinking, rather than like questioning the world around them as to like why we do things and like how does anything even make sense. And it's like the exact thing that she says at the beginning of The Bluest Eye of like sometimes when we don't like, why is a very hard question. Hi, Deanie. And so often when we can't sit with why, we have to engage with how, because like a lot of the time the question why is like there isn't really justification for a lot of the bullshit that exists in like why people are treated the way they are, why the earth is treated the way it is, and just human history in general. There are a lot of gaping holes with the question why leaves open. Okay, so in moving along to the reading, Juniper is joining us. I'll let you see her a little bit. Trying to. Hi, Buggy. Okay, there we go. As long as she's wanting to stay here, she can be in the spotlight. Which is, oh, that's her right. We're getting close-ups of the cats today. Love that. I think I'm just gonna read the first bit of this just as we're running lower on time. But I did want to continue our reading of the Communist Manifesto, where often the address of the Central Committee to the Communist League is included, and it is in my version. So, hello, Coz. Welcome. How are you doing? Not bug. She seems to know there's more focus on her now. Okay? Although it is concerning when it zooms in on me. Oh, thank you. That's very nice. All right. Address of the Central Committee to the Communist League, March 1850. Delivered to the committee members in writing, the address promotes the idea that it is our interest and our task to make the revolution permanent until all more or less possessing classes have been forced out of their position of dominance. Brothers, I may include just people, women, but beyond patriarchy. Although, with all of this zooming, is this disconcerting for everyone? I just don't like when it's starting to zoom in on me. I think I'm gonna go back to this camera. Just a sec. Okay. She's still here. Brothers, in the two revolutionary years, 1848 to 1849, the League proved itself in double fashion. First, in that its members energetically took part in the movement in all places, that in the press, on the barricades, on the battlefields, they stood in the front ranks of the only decidedly revolutionary class, the proletariat. The League further proved itself in that its conception of the movement as laid down in the circulars of the Congresses and of the Central Committee of 1847, as well as in the Communist Manifesto, turned out to be the only correct one, that the expectations expressed in those documents were completely fulfilled, and the conception of present-day social conditions, previously propagated only in secret by the League, is now on everyone's lips, and is openly preached in the marketplaces. At the same time, the former firm organization of the League was considerably slackened. A large part of the members who directly participated in the revolutionary movement believed the time for secret societies to have gone by and public activities alone sufficient. The individual circles and communities allowed their connections with the Central Committee to become loose and gradually dormant. Consequently, while the Democratic Party, the party of the petty bourgeoisie, still true, organized itself more and more in Germany, the Workers' Party lost its only firm foothold, remained organized at the most in separate localities for local purposes, and in the general movement thus came completely under the domination and leadership of the petty bourgeois Democrats. An end must be put to this state of affairs. The independence of the workers must be restored. The Central Committee realized this necessity, and therefore already in the winter of 1848 to 49, it sent an emissary, Joseph Moll, to Germany for the reorganization of the League. Moll's mission, however, was without lasting effect, partly because the German workers at that time had not acquired sufficient experience, and partly because it was interrupted by the insurrection of the previous May. Moll himself took up the musket, entered the Baden-Palatinate army, and fell on July 19th in the encounter at the Murg. The League lost in him one of its oldest, most active, and most trustworthy members, one who had been active in all the congresses and central committees, and even prior to this, had carried out a series of missions with great success. After the defeat of the revolutionary parties of Germany and France in July 1849, almost all the members of the Central Committee came together again in London, replenished their numbers with new revolutionary forces, and set about the reorganization of the League with renewed zeal. Reorganization can only be carried out by an emissary, and the Central Committee considers it extremely important that the emissary should leave precisely at this moment when a new revolution is impending, when the Workers' Party, therefore, must act in the most organized, most unanimous, and most independent fashion possible if it is not to be exploited, and taken in tow again by the bourgeoisie as in 1848. Brothers, we told you as early as 1848 that the German liberal bourgeois would soon come to power and would immediately turn their newly acquired power against the workers. You have seen how this has been fulfilled. In fact, it was the bourgeois who, immediately after the March movement of 1848, took possession of the state power and used this power to force back at once the workers, their allies in the struggle, into the former oppressed position. Though the bourgeoisie was not able to accomplish this without uniting with the feudal party, which had been disposed of in March, without finally even surrendering power once again to this feudal absolutist party, still, it has secured conditions for itself, which, in the long run, owing to the financial embarrassment of the government, would place power in its hands and would safeguard all its interests, if it were possible for the revolutionary movement to assume already now a so-called peaceful development. The bourgeoisie, in order to safeguard its rule, would not even need to make itself obnoxious by violent measures. By violent measures against the people, since all such violent steps have already been taken by the feudal counter-revolution. Developments, however, will not take this peaceful course. On the contrary, the revolution which will accelerate this development is near at hand, whether it will be called forth by an independent uprising of the French proletariat, or by an invasion of the Holy Alliance against the revolutionary Babylon. And the role, this so treacherous role, which the German liberal bourgeois played in 1848 against the people, will in the impending revolution be taken over by the democratic petty bourgeois, who at present occupy the same position in the opposition as a liberal bourgeois before 1848. This party, the Democratic Party, which is far more dangerous to the workers than the previous liberal one, consists of three elements. Ooh. I'm also going to save this link. Tan. I'll show this tomorrow. Once again, thank you all for having excellent taste. Excuse me. I'm going to go through these three elements, and then that's where I'm going to stop today. Of the most advanced sections of the big bourgeoisie, which pursue the aim of the immediate, complete overthrow of feudalism and absolutism, this faction is represented by the one-time Berlin compromisers, by the tax resistors. 2. Of the democratic constitutional petty bourgeois, whose main aim during the previous movement was the establishment of a more or less democratic federal state, as striven for by their representatives, the lefts in the Frankfurt Assembly, and later by the Stuttgart Parliament, and by themselves in the campaign for the Reich Constitution. 3. Of the Republican petty bourgeois, whose ideal is a German federative federative republic after the manner of Switzerland, and who now call themselves red and social democratic because they cherish the pious wish of abolishing the pressure of big capital on small capital, of the big bourgeois on the small bourgeois. The representatives of this faction were the members of the Democratic Congress and committees, the leaders of the Democratic associations, the editors of the Democratic newspapers. Okay. You're off for the night. I think I'm also going to be off for the night. Thank you for being here. Thank you for viewing. I greatly appreciate the support. It means a lot to me. Happy Pride. Thinking of you. Sending you rest, strength, solidarity. I'm gonna wash these gloves after this. It doesn't help with me like petting my cats with these gloves on. There's like a ton of cat. They're mostly just so they're a barrier between my sweaty hands and the pages of my books. But anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your support. It does mean so much to me. And I am hoping to continue to keep streaming and, growing this community. I appreciate you all for your support and also the support that you offer each other and like the intelligence you have and like the vast experiences that you all come from and are willing to share. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful for you all. Sending you all love, sending you pride, solidarity, and strength. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are. And I will see you soon. Okay, bye.